In a world of podcasts, one rises in the night to destroy them all. The elder god in an ocean of noise, the Cthulhu of the airwaves. This is Spoiler Country.
All right, everybody, welcome again to another episode of Spoiler Country. Today on the show, we have Frank Barbiere and Arris Quinones. And I'm sure I'm going to mess up those names several times in a row because I'm an idiot from Alabama. You guys, how are y'all? Y'all are, Frank, you're in Austin, Texas. And Arris, I didn't get where you're from, man.
I'm in Dallas, Texas. So I'm just...
man.
Yeah, I'm 3 hours from Frank.
Big Texas energy.
I know, right?
So
everything's bigger in Texas.
How did you guys end up meeting up?
We actually met up through a mutual friend. It was actually like Frank's childhood friend, Rob, and he became a friend of my friend. It's like so many, it's kind of weird. Like he became a friend of one of my
Tangled
friends.
web.
Yeah, and long story short, I was starting a comic book YouTube channel back then. He's like, oh, dude, one of my best friends growing up, he's a comic book writer. His name's Frank. He's got 5 Ghosts coming out. All that stuff. He's like, I should hook you guys. Long story short, I reached out to Frank, interviewed him for my YouTube channel. And then we became buds. We just continued talking after that, and years went by. I'm like, hey, dude, let's do a comic book together. And then we did.
Do you remember what year it was, Arris? Because was the trade of 5 Ghosts coming out? So was it like 2013, 2014?
It was the second year of Variant. So it had to be 2013, 2014, like you were saying. Definitely. So that's a long time, man. We've almost known each other a decade. That's crazy.
No.
I know, right?
My friend who he's referring to, I've known for 20 years now. So I'm like, we're very close to it.
That's awesome. So starting off, Frank, you've been in the industry for a while. You've worked for some of the big two. You've worked for Image. How did you get your start, man?
I had a pretty organic process of breaking into comics, and again, it's something I talk about a lot, and I like to put out there because I know there's a lot of people who are fascinated about the industry, fascinated how to get started. But when I was in college, so like around like 2005-ish, I was really actively going to the comic book shop. I was reading a lot of early Image books and just really like never put together the fact that these were just kind of like creator-owned comics. And I read an article in Wizard, I think at the time, about like the process of about how the process of like modern Image kind of worked. Like, oh, people literally just submit projects to them and then they put them out. And me and my young man's hubris was like, I'm just gonna make a comic book and Image will put it out. Cool, here we go. And I very irresponsibly started taking money out of my student loans, extra money to hire artists I was finding just on the internet to start making comic book pictures. I kind of just dove right in, and it took probably around like 6 or 7 years from then for me to make work that I actually thought I was like proud of. And I moved back home, and I actually became a middle school teacher. And I had done like completely self-financed a graphic novel called Divine Intervention, which came out on Arcana. Please don't read it; it's very bad, but it's out there. That was the first thing I ever did, and when I moved back to New Jersey, well, I went to school in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey, but I actually grew up like a few, like literally 10-minute drive away from the Kubert School.
Oh,
when I
cool.
moved back home, I was like, oh, wait, like the Kubert School is right there. There's probably art students who want to work where I can actually meet and not just have to hire people over the internet. So I did a like Google search on DeviantArt of like Kubert School people. And that's how I met Chris Mooneyham. And actually also Gary Brown, who is, again, phenomenal artist. And they were both in the same... I think they were in the same class, funny enough. And I just hit up Chris via email, and we went and got lunch, started talking. We worked on a book for a year that went nowhere. We made like 70 pages of the sci-fi Western comic that I eventually like put online. So I'm just like, hey, this is what we were trying to break in with. But halfway through that, I had the idea for 5 Ghosts. And I guess we had been reading the Darwin Cook Parker books. I think the first one came out, and I was like, oh, we should do something like kind of like pulpy or like this, like, I guess I'd read like Casanova, like the old Casanova, like the first one when it was like in weird, like big issues. And I got really enamored with doing something like that. And I was like, oh, but if we do like a pulpy, like spy thing, like it has to have like a gimmick, like what could the gimmick be? And just randomly thinking one night, I was like, oh, like he should have like maybe like Sherlock Holmes powers or something. Like maybe he can actually channel Sherlock Holmes. And from that, I was like, oh, what if we did more characters? And that's how we thought 5 Ghosts. Like Chris drew that pitch begrudgingly because we were trying to work on this other book, and I forced him to do it. And I think that was like New York Comic Con 2012. We got a table. I think I had done a short at Dark Horse. I had started doing some of the white suit shorts at Dark Horse at this point, and I had quit teaching and was like, I'm going to be a writer even though I have no money and I'm on unemployment and I live in New York City now, but we'll figure it out. And I bring that up because funny enough, I ended up actually working at ComixOlogy when they were still very much a startup. And that's how I kind of
was destined to be.
Well, that's how I met the folks over there who I, again, kept in touch with, obviously, and really love and have a great relationship with. Long story short, after New York Comic Con 2012, no one gave a damn about the book that we had that was 70 pages long, but everyone was looking at the like 5 pages of Five Ghosts Chris drew in his portfolio, and he had hand lettered them. It was like, this looks awesome. And I was like, yo, we should just make this book, man. So we made it. Yet again, no one cared. We sent it to a bunch of places. They were like, this is cool. You should do this at Dark Horse. And my editor at Dark Horse was like, you should do this at Image. And then then initially we got no response from Image because like, it was like they get buried in submissions. It's just hard. Like they'll look at every one, but there's no timeline on that. So I was very frustrated. I was like, forget it, Chris, we'll just self-publish this book. So we actually did a Kickstarter in 2012. And then I think it was New York Comic Con. Maybe that was New York Comic Con 2011. But then in 2012 or 2013, I can't remember which, we self-published it. And we made 65 and they sold out in like an hour at New York Comic Con. This was the first time anyone has ever read a comic that I made. I was so happy, but also so horrified knowing how much money and time it took to put this book out. And at the time, like Sam Humphries was doing like Our Love Is Real and stuff like that. And there were a lot of like kind of like, oh, like self-published books are able to get into retail and things like that. But thankfully, saving us all from that, a mutual creator picked it up and actually sent it to Eric Stevenson, who had taken over since Eric Larson, who I had initially been pitching stuff to at Image. And Eric reached out to us, was like, hey, do you want to do this at Image? And that was the happiest day of my life. And it literally changed my life. So people are able to like pinpoint certain stuff. For me, it is like literally the day he emailed me. I remember, funny enough, W. Maxwell Prince, he goes by, is my friend from college, and he writes Ice Cream Man at Image.
Oh, yeah.
He's been my very good friend and trying to break into comics for a long time, and is clearly doing great now. And I remember I was on the phone with him at the time, and I was bitching about how no one like was answering my pitch, and I was so frustrated. And literally on the phone with him, I got the email from Eric that was like, do you want to do this at Image? I was like, I gotta go. And then from there it was just a matter of kind of like just beating the pavement, following up people, going cons, growing, and thankfully like having people be supportive and like my work. And Five Ghosts remains like, again, I think the most popular thing I've ever done, and I really loved it. But that was just it, and it just hit from there and kept going. And these days I pulled back a bit from comics, which is why Astonishing Times is so exciting. It is kind of like my return in a book I really care about, which is hopefully momentous to some people. But I actually have been working in video games for a while now. I was up in Albany and I worked at an Activision studio called Vicarious Visions and wrote a bit on Destiny 2. And now I'm in Austin. I actually work with Joe Mad, comics fave Joe Mad, at a studio called Airship Syndicate, where we put out a Darksiders game last year called Darksiders Genesis. And now we're working at a League of Legends RPG that we'll be talking a lot more soon, and super happy, but it's really been kind of my focus, and freelance really burned me out. So I was glad to take a little bit of a break, but now I've kind of slowly been building this, which Arris could probably speak to us. Years ago, we were like, we should do a comic, and we finally got it all together, and we were happy to bring it to ComixOlogy to kind of explore everything they have there, as we really felt it was a good fit for this initial project and what we were doing, and they got excited about it. But that is my whole life story. Did 40 minutes go by already?
So now I want to hear from Arris. Arris, how did you get into comics? I know that you have an amazing following on YouTube,
right?
And I mean, you're grinding away, and now you're doing comics. So tell us how you got into why comimes?
Well, it's, since it kind of started when I was a kid, right? Like if anyone always asks me, like you just did, and I always say on the YouTube channel, like Batman the Animated Series and the 89 Tim Burton movie, that's like what did it for me, right? I just always liked Batman for whatever reason. Just like, a lot of kids are like, oh, Batman, he's cool. Pointy ears, batarangs, that's dope. So like from a kid, it was really Batman the Animated Series. And then that led to like Spider-Man the Animated Series, and the X-Men. That's like when all those animated series were like really dope, because I'm a 90s guy. I was born in 87, so by the time I was 4 or 5, that's when those series were like at their peak. And then from there, I'm basically like, okay, so these cartoon series are awesome, but wait, they're based on comic books. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, it's like, so this comic books are a thing. So it kind of helped me want to read, right? Because I'm like, oh, I want to know about like where these characters came from. You're telling me there's way more content in the books and stuff like that. So then I would have my mom, my dad taking me to comic book shops, and then just like as a kid, you know, you just see the art, like it's all about the cover. Like you don't care about like, you know, when you're jumping in, you're just like, oh, that's like a dope like Jim Lee cover. I just want that because that's cool, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would read stuff out of order and stuff like that. But I just always loved it, and from there, that really sparked my love. And my dad would often go to like work and write at a Barnes and Nobles, and I would go with him. And then, you know, I'd get the omnibus and stuff from like the Marvel Golden Age stuff. And so I actually like, even though I'm a 90s kid, a lot of the stuff I read was like, you know, when everyone was reading Wally West in the 90s, I was reading Barry Allen because I was going back to like the omnibus and stuff like that. So it's funny considering my age. People ask me like, who's your favorite Flash? I'll still say Barry Allen just because that's the one I read, even though Wally West was technically my era of Flash. But from there, you know, flash forward, I just love comic books. And then flash forward to like 2007, my brother-in-law had a pretty popular DIY filmmaking YouTube channel called Film Riot. And he was on Revision 3, which was owned at Discovery Digital at the time. So that, you know, was getting pretty popular, and he wanted to do another show. So he's like, dude, you like comic books? So by this time, I'm like, I don't know. I just turned 34. So the show's been on, I was like, I don't know, 25, 24 around there. So like 2007.
What were you doing, if you don't mind me asking?
So at that, I was literally a warehouse manager for Tyco in Boca Raton, Florida. Like, so I was the dude to like make sure the inventory
deep in the industry.
Yeah, deep. It's nothing to do with comics. I was like still living at home, like you know what I mean. Just had a car payment and a cell phone payment. So there was nothing I was really at that point in time. Like I wasn't really trying to be in the comic book industry at all. I was just like a pure fan, just watching all the movies, buying the toys, buying the comic books. But I was working out again with my brother-in-law. He's like, dude, I want to start another. You love comic books. Would you want to co-create a comic book YouTube channel with me? Because this was like, again, like the start of the MCU. Like this was when, at the time, 2008 was the Iron Man and Hulk, right? The first one.
First Iron Man.
Right.
See, that makes me feel old.
Yeah, right. So, you know, we're all like, oh, this is a thing, right? It's the emergence of like the post-credit scene where they're all linking together. It's a universe. Like, let's do it. And then we basically from 2008 to like 2011, that's a lot of people don't realize. Like, Variant was like in creation behind the scenes for like 3-4 years, which is weird because I'd never hosted anything before, so I was horrible. Like I was like, what do you mean I have to talk into a camera? I have to read and make it look like I'm not talking. I mean, like I'm not reading. Like this is weird. So we would shoot a bunch of pilots, and he also had to convince Revision 3, because it was Discovery Digital, that like I was good enough to host. So funny, I didn't find out till years later that like they were literally like, no, like we don't want this guy. We don't want to host this show. Like he's not good. But he's like, trust me, because he had a really popular show with them at the time. So like he had like a little bit of sway. So like, look, trust me, like I'm doing this with them. We're doing it together. It's gonna work. So we did it. We launched it in 2012, the year the first Avengers movie came out. And man, people always ask like, how'd the channel? Because right now we're like, almost at 2.5 million subscribers on YouTube. And like, how'd you get the channel so big? How'd you grow it? It's like, I think it's a mixture of like, we hit at the right time. Because again, this was like when the MCU was like all culminating with the first Avengers movie. Because now we're spoiled, right? We've seen like, we had so many like Endgame, Infinity War, we've seen it all pretty much. But back then it was like, the Avengers are assembling. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Like it was crazy. So you had all this interest too from people who normally didn't read comics. They would go to YouTube. They're like, oh, there's Hawkeye. There's a guy who shoots bows and arrows. Black Widow. Like she's like this mercenary assassin like girl. Like so they would go on the internet, and we wanted to make a channel where it's basically like, we would tell you the history of a comic book character in 10 minutes. So I'll tell you everything you need to know about Batman, or at least like the big points, 10 to 15 minutes. And it worked because people wanted to know. They would see the movie, they wanted to know about the character, and it's the comic book industry was starting to blow up a little bit again. So that's kind of like how it all started. And then we just kept trucking along with different show types. Our history of is still our big staple, where again it's like we'll take the history of any character, Spider-Man, break them down in 10 minutes. We do versus episodes, a lot of pull list episodes, which is basically we'll break down a storyline. So like, this is the Killing Joke in 10 minutes. This is, Flashpoint in 10 minutes or whatever. So we're basically the easiest way to say it is I think we became like a comic book school, like for dummies, I guess. It's like we're just a casual fan that's not like, you know, us that's gonna deep dive and read 100 back issues they just want to know in 10 minutes, you know.
It's funny because I talk to creators now, and especially guys that work at the big two, and I'm like, do you ever feel just buried under the burden of all of that continuity?
Right.
Just, you know, sometimes 40, 50 years, even more continuity. And I forget who it was. There's a song by the band called the Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, and he says you take what you need and you leave the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically like his philosophy of writing for comics, because you can't, there's so many different just things that don't add up if you count all of the continuity. So how do you whittle all the bullshit? Like,
it's hard, dude, right? Like, I think that's a big reason why the channel is like successful, because I'm basically doing all the hard work for you, right? So like, legit, I don't think people realize, like, because I would say I know a lot about comic books, right? But there's no way I know everything. You know what I mean? Like, it's just impossible. So people, like, you know, they'll talk to me automatically expecting to like put out like dates and issues, first appearance. Like, I'm like, I can do that for a lot of characters, not all, because there's a lot of, so I'm constantly learning, right? So it's fun in that sense, where it's like, there's certain characters like Batman, Spider, like my favorite characters that for the most part I could be like, yeah, this, right? But then like Black Widow's a good example, right? Like Red Guardian is in the movie now. Iron Maiden. I've read them in Avengers books, but I didn't read them a lot, so I don't know that much about them. So I had to go back.
I have no idea who those people are.
Right? See what I'm saying? So like Red Guardian is like the Soviet Captain America, pretty much, right? That was like their answer to Captain America. So like I had to go back and like learn about him, read and do all like the cliff notes, read some issues, you know, go on some sites to just see like what's the major story on it. So I have to learn a lot myself and fact check. That's because you know, comic book nerds, you get something wrong, they'll let you know.
Oh yeah, they will pounce you. They will pounce on you.
That's like the hardest part. So basically it's a lot of time, man, but you know, I kind of have a process now where like, you know, I even structure things to where if it doesn't make sense, like you were just saying, because a lot of times you can't really make it make sense. Like there's a saying on the show that we're probably going to make into a t-shirt. It's like, because comic books, right? It's like, because comic books. Like the most annoying, I think, episode I've done to date was the history of Reverse Flash, for obvious reason. Dude, you don't even know. That was, man, I think that episode took me like a week to write, just because of all the timelines, and it's like, even when you understand it, you're like, wait, does that make sense? Because he did this and he did that, but no, then they rebooted it because Jeff Johns did this. So it's a lot of work is the short answer.
The only, I think, the only character that is just as, if not more convoluted, would be like Hawkman or somebody like that. And that is just...
Funny enough, there's one Hawkman we've put off. So it's funny you mentioned that, because we're gonna have to do it when the Black Adam movie comes off, but also Blackest Night. The Black Knight storyline, just because it's so big, and I feel like to do it justice, you have to really read and make sure, because if you miss a part, be like, how did you miss the part where like the White Lanterns did this? It's just, I've read it, but it's so big, it's like, it's just daunting. I'm like, well, maybe we'll wait. Let me wait. We'll do the Killing Joke. Let's do the Killing Joke.
So you guys you have a book now that you're working on, and it's coming out through Variant, correct?
It's coming out through ComixOlogy, but we're pushing it through Variant. Well, that's because, not to go backwards a little bit, but I could let that cat out of the bag now, since you know the book is announced and stuff. One of the main reasons, I would say like half, if not more so, the reasons we did Variant is because like, hey, we're gonna, you know, get an audience, build an audience, hopefully, because at the time we're like, hopefully this works. And once we've amassed an audience, we can create, you know, content, and then be like, here, we created something. You
have the built-in audience.
We have a built-in audience. You don't have, you know what I mean? So that was part of the idea, and we finally, almost 10 years later, are hitting that aspect of the channel, which is really cool.
All right, in 5 words, tell me Astonishing Time. No, I'm joking.
Arris, do you want to speak to kind of just how we started talking about it more? Because again, I had been making comics and kind of was like, went into hibernation, and Arris actually hit me up. It was like, hey man, like, I really would love to know like about the process. Like I always wanted to make a book, and we got talking, but do you want to talk more specifically how we ended up where we did?
Yeah, sure. So like Frank said, like, I've known him for a few years at that point, and at that time he kind of, was on a hiatus of comic books. He didn't write a book for a few years, right, Frank? It's been a while, right?
Yeah, and I think because I feel like we had talked about this way in the past, because again, you want to do it for so long, and I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll get there, and you're like, well, I need to find like a good time, and I think it was probably around like 2017 when we
Hmm.
started actually seriously trying to figure it out, and that's like right when I think I got into games. I think Violent Love was at Image was wrapping up, and that was like the
Okay.
last gig I like was taking. So yeah, I think I
Yeah.
was like, I'm just kind of chilling out and thinking about my next move. So let's just like blue sky this.
Yeah. So yeah, we've been talking about, but I don't think I ever told you this, Frank. So it was weird. I think it was like 2018 or something like that. Like it's kind of funny, but like I caught the flu, right, from my daughter, and it's a joke with my wife
Kids are
because
petri
like
dishes, man.
yeah, right. So
Absolutely.
like in my like I had a high fever and stuff like that, like 104 or 5 fever or whatnot. So like in my like delirium or whatever, like my fever sleep, I joke, I said I had a fever dream, and in that was like an idea for a comic book, right? Where I had this whole like thing. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And then that was the thing where I was like, I know we've been talking about this, Frank, but like like I have this initial idea. The book is nothing of what that initial idea is now.
It
But
was
that
more
was
like it was more of the villain book, right? Like because
right.
that's what
Don't.
we were talking
Well,
about.
we might do that later. Don't give away too much, though.
Okay,
I
yeah.
want to save that.
Say it was a very different book, but
It was yeah. It was a very different, but we could say it was centered. It was more villainous, right? And Frank was like, "Well, what if we do this? Like, I like that aspect. So what if we change it this?" And then as things naturally do when you have a co-creator and you're talking about stuff, they just evolve. And like Frank gives ideas. I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And then I come up with an idea, and he comes up with another idea, and it becomes this completely new thing. And that's what pretty much happened. And man, from there, it took a bit.
I'm looking away like
Yeah,
yeah.
it took a bit because
Took some doing.
it took a few months too because you were traveling to like China around that
Yeah,
time and stuff
it's when I
too.
went to Japan and
Oh, Japan it
Singapore, and
was.
I just remember I gave you these artificial deadlines of like, listen, I can't think about anything till after I get back from Japan.
Because we were
But
bouncing ideas back and forth, and it was like eventually, we landed on something. We're both like, "Oh, this is dope." Because I remember, because again, I can say that it was more of a villain story, but you were like, "Let's do something more hero story." Because mine, the initial idea was like, I don't want to say that because I kind of want to use
yeah,
that later. Yeah,
don't put
okay.
yourself in a podcast. But I will say, like, for me, it was the like number one genre, and I think I told Aries this initially. Like, genre I don't want to do is superhero stuff because it's so hard to stand out in that. And and again, I had worked at Marvel and DC. I had done the only like superhero adjacent or like kind of facing book I had done was a book called Black Market with one of my favorite collaborators, Victor Santos, who co-created and drew that book. And that was like a 4-issue creator-owned series that we just did about like, oh, like what if there was a world where superheroes were kind of assholes and someone found out that there was a cure for everything in their blood. And it was very much like Breaking Bad meets superheroes was like the early pitch for that. And I had done that and loved it. And admittedly, one of my favorite comics of all time is Powers. And that's really what got me into making comics like in an indie space really too. Because I of course I love like big two stuff, but Powers was the thing that really brought me even into like what Image was modernly. And what I told Arris is like, listen, I really don't know. I'm gonna have to like come up with something I want to say. But then Arris brought me all his ideas and his passion, and that got me excited again. I'm like, okay. But I feel like that's part of why I was like, Arris, wait till I get back from Japan, we'll figure it out. Because I did a little bit of searching because I always was like, oh, I had some ideas in the back of my head, like notes, places like I think I had like disappearing hero story ? Like written on my written on my computer notepad forever. But once we started talking, that stuff all came up again, and I thought about like, okay, if we did like a definitive superhero story in 20 whatever year we were first talking, like what would we actually want to say? And if you remember, those were like the talking points. Like I quickly like
Yep.
gave Arris like highfalutin writer, like, no, what are we saying? Like, what is this about? But thankfully, like we really aligned, and that helped us like hone in like beyond the cool plot elements. And one of the things that I like about co-writing is it's more like people do it all kinds of ways, but like for me, really co-writing is exciting because it's that like breaking story. Like you're talking together, coming up with
Yeah.
ideas and like figuring out what you want to do, not being like, okay, you write 2 pages, I write 2 pages, you write 2 pages. And again, some people do it like that, no hate, but like for us, it was much more of like, okay, well, what do we love about superhero comics? What do we want to do with it? And that was really exciting for me, because that's the kind of stuff that I've been thinking about a long time. And as I said, like, I just didn't have a take I was ready to put out, but through our conversations, like, I feel like we came up with one that was very personal, very timely. And again, I'm not gonna get into marketing speak about the book, but like, Astonishing Times is very much that, like, our like answer of like, okay, like, create our own superhero stuff for the most part is either like your love letter to the 90s, a love letter to Watchmen, a love letter to crime, like, or like your shitty version of Batman. Like, and we've all done it. I have a lot of shitty versions of other superheroes I've tried to come up with over the years. But for me, like with us, I was like, let's really find something that is ours, that speaks to things we want to say about superhero comics. And that was the impetus of it. And I'm so happy with where we ended up. And we, for a long time, like we went through a lot of different art teams, as that is one thing that happens with comics.
We did. It's funny too, because like
how hard it is.
I'm like the fresh meat, right? So I'm like, Frank, is this normal to go like to do this many artists?
Well, and it's so hard because like when you do stuff with a publisher, typically they'll assign you people or introduce you. And for us, we got Lauren Affey, our colorist, on board very early, as she's worked with me on a lot of stuff through our career, was on Five Ghosts, and has done a lot on her own as well. And I was thankfully easy to wrangle her, and she's a collaborator I've worked with a lot. But artist was just like, and at no fault to anyone, but just like people's schedules were filled. We would start making a pitch because we didn't know where we were going to publish this either. I was just like, Arris, let's just make we need to make a pitch, which is like at least 5 pages, and like, let's go. Like, and we wrote like a big outline and like a big, like, I think the first issue, but I just want to use this to shout out our artist, Ruri Coleman, who we thank the Lord ended up with, as he is just
nicest dude too. Such a nicest dude as well.
Dude, but like such a talented artist, and like jumped in so fast and was able to get this book done and be just like a key co-creator with it to like really elevate the stuff and really like get the work and like go through every single page with us. And he is phenomenal, and I'm sure we'll link him and things like that. But he really was like kind of like that missing soul of the book too. I feel like once we started getting pages from him, like it really came together. As thankfully we didn't get so deep as to draw like a whole issue from anyone, but we had like 4 different people draw the first 5 pages of this book. And
Ruri was dope too, because I feel like he elevated everything, right? Because we would have, we would script things out, and then he would just, change little things. And when he was like giving us pages, we're like, oh no, that's so much better. Like there's one action beat I remember specifically. I'm like, that is so much better than what we wrote.
and that's what I was quickly telling Arris. I'm like, listen, the artist will do all the hard work. Don't worry, they'll make us look smart.
Exactly. Yeah,
I've had a career full of like being very lucky with my collaborators, and Ruri and then Lauren with Ruri has been an absolute delight. And you see some of it in the teaser trailer we put out in Arris's announcement video, just some of our characters or some of the art. But before I just prattle on and on, Casey, is there anything more specifically question based you're interested in now? Like, because I can just talk.
I wanted to explain. I wanted to explain the title, if you could, just Astonishing Times. How did you guys come across that?
Well, I think like I think like the not to be sales pitchy, but like the easiest way to like summarize like the book, right? It'll ultimately explain the title, is like, it's kind of like a reverse Watchmen. It's like how we kind of like to like, push it in the sense of like, if Watchmen is a book that explores like, superheroes are supposed to save us and stuff, but they deal with like a lot of crap. Like they could be rapists, they could be bad. They're just bad people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so that's one of the main themes for Watchmen, right? Where it's like, we're supposed to look up superheroes, but like they also could be really crappy people as well. So maybe we shouldn't always look up to them. Where our book is like the flip, right? So it's like to show the heroes are something we're supposed to look up to. Not necessarily always for them to like save us, but just to like, it's like a line that we use to, look up for a better tomorrow, right? So it's on the brighter side. Right. Yeah. It's on the brighter side of things. And especially with like, the last year or so, I think it's something that's really going to be, hopefully be welcomed. It's, some positivity, where it's like a love letter, right? It's showing us like, why do like us kids subconsciously, why are we drawn to superheroes, right? It's like kind of, why do we really like superheroes? When you really think about it, it's like, because inherently I think people are good. Like overall, inherently people do want to be good. Yes, there's lots of crap
we're
out
big
there.
softies. That's why
Right, yeah.
Watchmen.
So, it's kind of like the whole thing. Like, why do kids want to be like doctors or firefighters, all that stuff? It's because they help people, right? So I kind of feel like the same thing with superheroes. So that's kind of what we're exploring. It's like, yeah, people can be crappy. There's bad in the world for sure, but at the end of the day, things are bright. We live in astonishing times. You know what I mean? Things are good.
That's awesome.
And it took us a long time to get there. Like, we had some other names that I won't bring up that were cool, like in their own right, but I feel like it was literally like right when we got Ruri on board and we were like seriously finishing like the key outlines. Like, we had a base outline, but then actually breaking it into issues, we were like, damn it, we need to name this book. What are we going to do? And I remember that was the first time I actually hung out with Arris when we were writing together, not just online. We were just like sitting in your office, like doing the old whiteboard, like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I think a lot more of a pain in the ass than Arris was. Arris was like more excited, and I'm just like, no, you'll know it when you hear it.
You're like, that's a good story arc title, but not a title.
It's a bit like naming a child, though, because I mean, you're stuck with it. If you get the wrong name, then I mean,
it's true.
You don't want to pick the name for a comic that people are going to make a pun out of, or make.
We haven't got any of that.
I've tried really hard to come up with something about Astonishing Times, and I can't. So you guys did it. Good job.
The one thing too I can say that isn't a spoiler that and this is what I was talking to Arris. It's hard to talk about some of the book because it's not out yet and we want to preserve a lot. But what we have put out there and what we can say is like the main character is a journalist and he writes about superheroes, and that was a really big in for me. Like, of like, oh, like I think that is a cool angle that we don't see, and he's lives in a world where superheroes have been around for a long time. Obviously, very much supposed to be a mirror of ours, where like we're all over it a little bit, and he who still kind of like deeply cares about them. And the name of his column is Astonishing Times. So that was my whole thing to Arris. I'm like, whatever the name of the book is has to be his column.
That's cool. That's cool.
Because I remember we had cool names where like the title of the book would be cool, but that doesn't really work for his column.
Yeah, there were a few, and then I'm like, this one's a poem, and we can have an in-universe poem, and I got a little too. But when we hit on Astonishing Times, like, first of all, there's the annoying, like, oh shit, like, let's SEO and make sure that's not taken. Thankfully, it's not. And obviously, like, it evokes a lot of like classic titles. Like, obviously, it just really works, and we feel like captures the essence of the book, and even like some of our like marketing partners and stuff who we had to convince of it. Like, I think we were a little skeptical at first, but then once they saw the awesome logo that our logo designer Dylan Todd, who is again another person I've worked with since Five Ghosts, he's amazing. And recently he did like Department of Truth and things like that. He works all over, and we were so lucky to get him to do production design for our book as well as logo. And it just kind of clicked. And as Arris was saying, like, we want to have a really aspirational but still exciting. And there's, again, our book isn't all hugs. There was some dark stuff that happens as well.
There's some dark stuff, yeah.
So on the whole, like, we didn't want to just retread, like, and that was for me like the hardest part, right? Like, I love Watchmen, like, it's one of my favorite books, like, but I never want to do like Frank's shitty Watchmen. Basically. Yeah, like no one in the world to read that, and that's why as a writer I tend to be very. I think I really learned this work at Marvel and DC, like. Anyone can be like tell like a cool like, oh, like the superhero faces a challenge, he finds some power that wasn't there 5 pages ago, fights them and beats them and wins, and everyone hugs. And you know what, like, that's a totally viable way and can be cool if it's drawn well. Like, but for me it was like, oh, but like, what can we say like now that I care about that again isn't overly preachy, isn't overly negative, but like means something. And I will say that my whole thing was like, I find it so fascinating that like Marvel and DC, like Marvel more so, sorry, DCU, but films are the most popular movies in the world. And while I think they hit like some good thematic stuff, like people look at those movies feeling more inspired. And but long story short, just like, what is like kind of the like aspirational, like thematic thing about superheroes that we can push and really tell a story we care about. And at Marvel and DC, I said, like, I learned like, oh, a lot of times, like, yeah, like people come for the characters, but then I think the truly great pieces of work there, which disappointingly I never achieved at my time at Marvel and DC, but like it really, when a creator and a team like find something to say with it beyond just like the cool aesthetics and what's happening, because we get that so much. And that was really what I wanted to bring to this book. And I think we definitely did. And I'm super proud of it. But also why, like, without sounding too like kissing the butts of journalists, like I know obviously working in comics, I've spent so much time talking to journalists and Arris as well, like people who commit their lives to talk about this stuff. And I feel like it goes so much deeper other than like Batman, things like that. And a big platform for the book is talking to journalists and being like, oh, like, well, why do you write about superheroes? Like, why do we think this is stuff that's still worth talking about? And that's why, without being a total nerd, I think it's cool that we have that meta in our book a bit. We have, and again, I don't think it's like hugely spoilers, but like our main character in the book's father was basically the Jimmy Olsen of the world, and he inherited that mantle, but now he's in a world where people are kind of burned out on superheroes and he still carries that torch. And that I feel like was a really good angle for us to pursue of like, oh, like, why does this stuff endure? Like, what is it about? Like, what have people gotten wrong about it? Like, what have people gotten right? And like, how do we recontextualize this? So it's really something that I was able to get excited about. Like, and again, Arris and I had to speak at length before we even started writing. So, but again, in Arris too, like, you know, like you've seen the way people respond to this material, like talking about it for a living. And
for sure,
that was what really fascinated us. Like, oh, like how can we put that into our story rather than just being like, oh, bad guys versus good guys.
Well, that's like another interesting thing. I think is like doing like basically like, you know, having created this you know, online comic book community at all these years. It's kind of like, you know, you read all the comments and you interact with them and you even make you know, friends and stuff with people, so you kind of know, you become to know like what people want, at least for like, you know, that community you're in and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. I was telling Frank, you know, while writing this, I'm like, dude, we got to do stuff like this because like, you know, that'll be cool for this, or you know, like you even kind of get a sense of like, you know, based on how the videos you're publishing are doing, like what's hot, what's not, what people want to hear. So like it's something that's never been done before, even making comics, at least not the way we've done. Like people do Kickstarters and any stuff like that, but like this is completely, you know, different. Like I think, you know, there's even been some like comic book artists and writers who have their own YouTube channels and then they do their own Kickstarter and stuff like that. But that's like, well, of course everyone's going to support like a Jim Lee, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like who now has a YouTube channel. So this is like really, really different. But I think, you know, it gives us an edge up in the sense that like, you know, we have the built-in fan base and we kind of have that sense of like what is kind of doing well and what's not, you know what I mean? And it's really just not even so much of that as just we wanted to do a love letter to comic books. I think that's like the easiest thing. Going back to like the title of the book, like Frank kind of touched on it briefly, like Astonishing Times. It's very timely in the sense like amazing fantasy, the Fantastic Four, the Incredible Hulk, you know, it has that like Astonishing Times, that very like, you know, nostalgic superhero feel to it, you know.
I was about to say it kind of harkens back to an earlier, more innocent age in comics.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so one thing, and Arris, give me the like goon thumb if I'm like getting too far into marketing plans, but one thing that really excites me about having Variant as a platform as well, beyond just promotion of the book, is like I have never been shy. Like I was an English teacher before I was a writer. And I've always been fascinated about talking about how comic books work, like how you actually go from being just someone at home to making one. And that's something we really want to like bring to the audience as well. Like, hey, this is how we made this book. This is how you could actually make the book. Like, and that is just so exciting to me. And also to be able to put it on YouTube for free, not have to be like, oh, pay for my master class or things like that. Like that is information we really want to get out, like, as well as like, again, talking to a lot of other creators, like when we have the chance, like talking to journalists and just to be excited about it. Because as I said early on, like I burned out real hard on being a full-time comics writer. Like I was so tired. I wasn't excited about things. And again, it was really not cool because I loved comics so much. And this project has really been the perfect thing for me to remember, like, oh, hey, this is the stuff I do care about. And being able to, one, tell an awesome story with Arris, Ruri, and Lauren, but also like work with Variant to like make cool content that I think gets people who like this medium, who like this genre excited, and hopefully like gives like a tool set to like also start moving forward. Like, and again, Arris, I've been so happy to see so much of the varied audience be like, it's my dream to make a comic book too. And
Dude,
without me being like the guy, I'm like, and you can. Like,
no, that's the thing I think is so cool too, because like obviously like Frank, Rory, Lauren, all of us who created the book, like we want it to be successful and we want to do it because this is the story that we came up with and we want to tell. So obviously, but like we also did it, like I said it on Variant, like for the audience too, right? Because it's like Frank was speaking to, it's very much going to be like, we made this thing. It was always like, a dream and stuff like that. We're doing it. It's here. But also, this is how we did it, and this is how you could do it too. You know what I mean? Because like Frank said, that's not letting, we already said that in the announcement video that we're going to be doing like roundtables, like, like how did Frank and I script the book? How did, what was it like with the two of us going to Lauren and developing the color palette? What was, developing the world of Ruri? Because like the visuals is like one of the biggest, arguably like the biggest part, in the sense of like, if someone doesn't like the cover of the art, they're not going to get the book before they even read the words. So like just all that stuff, it's very much going to be like, this is a comic book. We hope you like it and stuff. But also, even if you don't necessarily like the book, this is how you make a comic book. So at least that's interesting to you. You know what I mean? So I think we're going to hit like a lot of aspects, Yeah.
And I won't go on and on about this, but that is one of the things that, looking back on my career, I love about comics, the fact that it was accessible, that like I could go from just being a college kid who moved home living with his parents to like, oh, I could go to a con, and like I still remember talking to people who I then ended up like working with like at cons as just a fan, and them taking time and being kind to me and telling me about their process, what they're doing, and like paying that forward is always important to me. That like comics is a special medium because that is accessible. I remember telling someone who was in film about it once, and they were like, Jesus, it's not like I can go to a convention and just like talk to Steven Spielberg like off the cuff. But in
right,
comics, you can probably talk to anyone. Like, and especially in those early days, like, and most of my friends who I was like breaking in with, like my friend Matthew Rosenberg, who I basically broke into comics with, and we did at the same time, like Ed Brisson, who actually like broke in just a little before us, snuck in, but like Mike Marisi, like everyone I know who like pushed to break into comics is now making comics. And that's like really cool to me and really rewarding to see like, hey, this is a very attainable thing. Like, as long as you don't let the like annoying parts get you down, and there are other circumstances that can set you off, but I think it is still such an accessible medium, and that's why I really got excited with this project, to bring that knowledge, to bring Arris's amazing platform, and bring our cool book out. So
awesome. Real quick, how do you guys handle, because you're co-writing this, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle the going in? Like, who handles what? Do you write a pass and then pass it on to Arris? Does Arris write a pass and pass it on to you? How does that work when you have a co-writer?
In a true collaborative spirit, Arris, do you mind if I start?
You go for it.
Well, and that's the one thing. Like, I've written many comics, fortunately, at this point. And for me, as I said, the interesting part is not like physically scripting a comic, is almost like a moving script. Like, there's like rules and you need to like be able to like use grammar and things like that, but largely it's about communicating a story to an artist who's going to draw it. So the exciting part for me is actually figuring out straight up what is going to happen. And for Astonishing Times, what we did really is just like talked a lot and just like broke the story, like went back and forth, like, oh, I would love this to happen, I would love this to happen. And what I was able to do with at least my background and teach Arris a little bit is like, oh, well, here's the structure of a 20-page issue. Like, we need to now take everything we discussed and break it down. But for me, like, and I'm a very talkative person, we basically like talked out every single beat of every issue, and then just wrote like bullet points of like, hey, here's pages 1 through each. And then just, I took that, turned it into a script, pass it to Arris. Arris would do a pass on the full script. We'd add the dialogue, do a pass on the dialogue, and it was done. But really what I consider the writing of the book is those conversations we had. And
for sure,
is always the most like rewarding stuff for me, and almost more how writers' rooms work in TV. Interestingly, like, people don't realize that typically the way a writer's room works is people will talk out an episode, and then one of the writers will go write it down and write the script. But it's that breaking together that is really like a fun collaborative process. So for me, it was really rewarding to do that into a comic as well, because again, I say this to Arris all the time, like, I don't care about being the one who writes like panel 1, John walks into a room. Like, it's more about like what happens. But
That was the most interesting thing to me, because again, this is the first comic I've ever written. So like, I was joking early on that I was like, Frank's gonna be my Yoda, right? Where like, because as far as like the basics go, the rules, like he was like, all right, lay it out for me, right? But like, everything Frank said was right. Like we basically wrote, in that sense, like when he came to the studio back in like, I don't know, 2018 or something like that, we wrote the whole story, like in the sense of like, this is everything that's going to happen on page 1 through 20 for issue 1, and then we did that for all the issues, right? So we had the entire outline. We knew where it was going to start, where it was going to happen in the middle, and how we were going to end, and all that stuff. So we had the structure of like the entire first arc, which I feel like is something that you think would be common sense, but it's so often just even in TV shows, movies, like any storytelling, you're like, clearly you didn't know where this was going to end. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I guess, like,
you just have to look at Game of Thrones to
right, or like Lost or something like that. It's like, oh, clearly you didn't like, but
shots fired. JJ.
Right. So in that sense, we wrote.
We're taking him down. I'm sure he's scared of us.
So we wrote the whole story in that that 12-hour day we spent just writing, and then from there.
But we had also been talking for 2 years about it.
We did.
But that was really when we broke it down, as I was saying, and I feel like did the like writing.
Yeah, and as far as like characters in the book too, it was just a lot of like, Frank, what do you think of this character? Wanted to do this, and he's like, oh yeah, it's cool. What about this? And then we just agree on a name, and then it's kind of organically happened.
And that is something that I'm not shy to say I leaned on Arris a lot for that excitement, as like I have like. Again,
I was super excited for that part. I was like, I got this cool idea for a character.
And I was very burned out when we started this. Probably a bummer. Sorry if I was a bummer, but like, and the things that interest me about writing is like, and this is like, I feel like some of the people I tell at work get so bummed out by this, but like, I don't love world building. Like, I love story and drama, and superheroes are obviously a lot more fun than I think some other genres. But like when we started talking, I was like, well, we need a character who's kind of like this. And I would let Arris chew on that and bring that energy of like, oh, I want to do someone with this power set or things like this. And that would then inspire me, and back and forth. So in a lot of ways, like if you're a writer who's tired, like try co-writing with someone, because that's how you can bring excitement back. Like I know a lot of people who do writing teams, and for me it was like a breath of fresh air, because I am very collaborative, and some people like to like have total control and be alone and just like secret it out, but like I like working with people, and I think games has helped me a lot with that too, like realizing like, oh, like I like when a project has a lot of creativity in it, and comics will always be the best to me though, because it is such a small pool, but being able to just like have someone else inspire you is a really like healthy thing for creative writing. And again, probably why most places like in TV use writers' room and things like that, because one person doing it can be very daunting.
Well, I think that worked in our favor too, right? Because it was like, you didn't necessarily want to do, put all the like work into that, where I'm like, no, I got this. Like I want to, you know what I mean? And like, and then the things that like I wasn't well versed in, it's like, you got that. So it quite literally balanced itself out, where it was like, it wasn't divvied up because we all had info in the entire thing, but it was more like, okay, like Frank was saying, I'm more excited about this, so I'll focus a little harder on this, and you're better at this, so you'll focus a little harder on this, and then we'll meet in the middle. You know what I mean? So it worked out really well.
That's awesome.
And truly, like I said, for me, like from the more mechanical side, I feel like put into practice, as I said, some like this is how I would love to like continue to co-write. And a lot of people do it differently. Again, there are people who will straight up be like, I'll write the first 10 pages, you write the last 10, and perfectly valid way to do it. But this for me, because I am a talker and breaking the story is always my favorite part, like really like got me in a headspace of like, oh cool, like this is how co-writing works for me and feels good. So
that's awesome. So you guys, it's coming out on ComixOlogy. When can we expect to see it?
July 27th.
July 27th. Awesome.
Yes.
It's issue 1. So we are doing issues, not one big drop, because I know sometimes the format's different. So it'll run from July to July, August, September, October, November. Yes.
And you could pre-order the first issue right now on ComixOlogy as well. That way it'll just download overnight, and you could read it in the morning.
So Astonishing Times, you guys, Frank Barbiere, Arris Quinones, you guys go out, find Astonishing Times. I'm so excited to see this book. Anytime you guys want to come back on, chat more about comics, chat about anything, by all means, give me a heads up. And
thank you so much for having us. Always.
Yeah, this was a pleasure. Yeah, it
Y'all-
was very nice chatting. I had a lot of fun.
Enjoy your
Arris's
weekend.
Arris's first comic interview too. So
It
momentous.
is, yes.
That's
Yay.
crazy considering that you have made a career out of
I'm
talking
always-
about comics.
I'm always on the other side, so
Yeah,
I'm always
yeah,
the one
yeah.
interviewing. So
You-
I've never
you-
been on this side.
You
Yeah,
broke this ground, Casey. And Casey, real
Awesome.
quick, just to
I'm
help
usually
us
in
build-
Casey's position.
I know we're probably running over, Casey, but like just so I can make good on our promise, like why do you like to cover superhero stories? Like what is exciting for you about this medium, or like what do you love about comics?
So
Take us there.
how I got here through meeting John and Kenric, who are the guys that started the podcast. I run a comics group called the Comic Jam, and we get young or new creators, people who just want to collaborate with other folks, be whether you're a writer, a letterer, a colorist, an artist. And I arrange to have these people come together and do a one-page collaboration, just one page based on a theme that everybody votes on. So
That's
it's
awesome,
very much like,
Yeah,
if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's no big deal because you haven't sunk a whole ton of time on it. And we've met a lot of folks that way. Frank Gogol, who is now writing Power Rangers, started off with the Comic Jam. Quite a few people. Matthew Sumo, who has done comics with A Wave Blue World. He was on the Dead Beats anthology. We've had a bunch of other folks who have eventually gone on to do things in comics or in animation, roundabout way, have done things through the Comic Jam. And I met John over Instagram because I heard his show and I thought it was cool. And now he has me hosting shows occasionally. So,
That's awesome.
but I love it. It's fun. It's super fun. I've gotten to talk to a lot of cool people like yourselves. And it's pushed me to actually shut up and create. And so like now I have issue 2 of a series that I've been writing going on the Kickstarter. We're pending approval now. So fingers crossed it gets approved, but I mean, the art's already done. And then I have a second book called Bigfoot Knows Karate. And that's coming out soon too. So I'm doing Voodoo Child and Bigfoot Knows Karate. And they're both very different books, but they're both very fun. And I have a hell of a time doing it. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Like I said, cool. That's what I love about comics. People,
I love that title, Bigfoot Knows Karate.
Oh yeah. The artist, my co-creator, came up with that title, and I'm trying to convince him to do some merch of a coffee mug with the character on it, with the Bigfoot character, and have him alter the logo to say Bigfoot needs some coffee. So anything to make an extra buck, man. We're trying to do comics here. But awesome. Yeah. And one benefit of me doing this is I get to pick people like y'all, got to pick your brains and kind of figure out what your method is, how you get stuff done. So I can kind of improve my own writing. So that's the goal.
Sounds good, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
you know the life you're living it.
Oh yeah. So every few days I'll come down to the basement and hide from my wife and kids and talk to folks like you, and then when they go to bed I'll write comics. So
hell yeah,
that's how it works. I got my family's right outside that door too, waiting.
How do you achieve that balance?
Oh man, it's tough, man. It's a lot of getting up early, that's for sure. Getting up early.
For real?
Yeah, getting up early. And then working once because I have a routine. So I have a 4-year-old and a 9-month-old. So the 9-month-old is a little easier just because she's not.
Oh yeah, they're paperweight right now.
Yeah. But the 4-year-old, she's full on like, I get home, daddy, or like, why are you working all the time? So that one's like, like this week is gonna be rough. So I had to warn like her and my wife, and I'm like, I'm gonna be really busy this week, so you're not gonna see much of daddy. But like today, I'm usually at the studio, but since it was just a writing day for Variant, I was like, well, I'll just write from home. That way I can at least have like my 4-year-old like sit next to me and play with her toys. That way, I'm still here.
Yeah.
She's not seeing daddy. So like just little stuff, like I look for little ways, like little workarounds, just like, well, I don't technically have to get to the studio today, so I'll work from home. I'm still working, but at least, you can come sit on my lap for a second. I could have lunch with you. You could sit right here. So it's just kind of achieving that and always asking questions like, you okay? You good? Especially with the wife, right? It's like, you okay? How you doing? I know it's stressful. You got both kids.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But it's hard, man. It's definitely hard. It's a constant struggle. That's for sure. There's no easy answer there. Just always trying to do my best.
So you guys as you collaborate, do you have to find a time to actually get together? Do you have to schedule time, or do you just go like?
For sure, because our artist, he's in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
So like it's a 6-hour time difference, and
because my artist for the Voodoo Child book is in England is 6 hours.
Yeah, so and he has 2 kids as well, right? And he just actually had a baby not too long ago. So it's like it's funny. It's like it's basically like me and Rui being like, Frank, you good? Right? You good, Frank?
Yeah, I'm still on like again. I work in games full time, but thankfully I've been home and like I'm just used to the freelance life, and thankfully have for my own, I guess, productivity, but not continuing the line of my genealogy. Do not have children, so I'm more just like whenever you guys are free, I'll take that.
So I get off at 5.
I think I used to like when I worked at Activision, like talk to Arris like in the car in a Starbucks parking lot. Just because I had to be at the studio. Yeah.
That's actually another trick too, like because I would work, like my full-time gig is Variant, right? So like on the way home, I'd be like, Frank, I'm leaving the studio at like 5-6, and it's a 30-minute drive for me to my house. So I'm like, we'll use that 30 minutes to talk plot, story, whatever, scheduling, and then we would do it that way. So you find little workarounds that way. When I get home, it's not like, Daddy, you're working again. You just got home. You know what I mean?
Well, you guys, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. And
thank you so much for having us.
Again, Astonishing Times, Frank Barbiere and Arris Quinones. It's been a pleasure. You guys look out for Astonishing Times, July 27th.
Yes.
Awesome.
Great talking to you
guys. Y'all
right.
Enjoy your weekend.
You too.
Happy 4th of July. Yeah.
Same to y'all.
Spaghetti. And we're back. That's right. We are back. Back in the saddle again. Well, I hope you guys really, really enjoyed that as much as we did making it for you. And if you like what you heard and you want to hear more, you got to go check out spoilerverse.com, because at spoilerverse.com we have a plethora amazing directors and artists of all walks of life, and editors and writers, and oh my God, are you a lover of comic books like we are? Then there's so many amazing people from the comic book world over at spoilerverse.com, and I highly implore you to go there and check it out.
Yeah, and while you're there, you can check out all the other podcasts on our network, like Bridges and Geekdoms and Funny Book Forensics and Haphazard Adventures and Nerds from the Crypt and so many more.
Misery
we put out
Point
episodes
Radio.
all the time. Go check all of them out, and check out all of the reviews and previews and articles we have going up every single day for you, every day on spoilerverse.com for you to check out and to read and to love and to like and to comment. We have a store link. You want to help support the site? You can do it 2 ways. One, go to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/spoilercountry, or go to our store link in the middle of the site there and get a t-shirt, a face mask, a hoodie, something, look fly as hell, and help support the site when you do that, because we get $1 or $2. And, maybe you want to talk to us. If you do, you can do it obviously on all the socials, but if you go to scpod.us/Discord, you can join our public Discord server and come and chat with us all day long.
I couldn't say it better myself, dude.
There you go.
You just mouthed out a ton of information at once, and really, I hope you guys enjoy what you're hearing, because we're working our butts off to bring it to you.
We are.
I guess there's only one left thing. Yeah, I'm going to go with it. There's only one left thing left to do.
What's that?
In an oceans of podcasts, we are Cthulhu. As Cthulhu compels you to
open the mind
and read more.
Spaghetti.
What's going on, everyone? Are you still looking for that perfect one-stop shop for all things pulp culture? That one place where you can hear hot takes about superheroes, Star Wars, video games, and more? Well, fear not. Bridging to Geekdoms is the place for you. A podcast that focuses on the current rumors, scoops, and controversies within the pulp culture world. Hosted exclusively on the Spoilerverse Network, you can find us on any one of your favorite podcatching apps, YouTube, and at spoilerverse.com. So don't miss out on the excitement. Find us and subscribe now.